Hello there. My name is David Aguiar. I am a first-year graduate student at University of Denver, where I am studying higher education. And this is a reflection video to talk about not only the course itself and the process of going through it my first quarter here, but it's also to reflect on the letter Praxis project that was assigned to us at the beginning of the quarter, in which you can actually find on the right side of this page. I have no clue where I'm pointing right now, but I'm hoping I'm pointing to the right side. But this video is reflecting on the course itself while also reflecting my thought process going into writing my letter Praxis project as well. So some of my initial learning goals for the course, to be quite honest, I didn't really have any expectations or large goals coming into this course. I think I learned over the past few years that I think it's best to just go into things with an open mindset and very few expectations and just see where it really takes you. And so far, it's been great for me so far. I'm in Denver now, so that's really cool. But if I were to choose a few initial learning goals for this course, it would be obviously to learn the foundations of higher education, definitely to acquire writing skills, reading skills, as well as research skills, which has been a difficult but very rewarding experience this quarter, both in my Introduction to Higher Education course, but also in my Introduction to Public Policy course as well. And lastly, I think another goal that I had coming in was how would I apply what I learned in the classroom to not only in my assistantship, but how can I apply this to my professional development as well as a student affairs professional. And I also wanted to be able to take different components from this course and apply it to my other courses. And so a lot of what I learned within this class was actually pretty helpful for the most part for my introduction to public policy, whereas introduction to public policy was very helpful when we started talking about that topic within higher education as well. So those were some of my initial goals coming into the course, and obviously to pass with an A. Some of the strengths and challenges coming into this course, I think I want to definitely speak about my weaknesses first. Some of my weaknesses was imposter syndrome. So the first 2 months of this quarter in August and September, when I started my assistantship as a graduate resident director in housing residential education, and then my first month as a grad student, it was very difficult for me to find my place here and feel like I actually belonged. And so it was pretty difficult navigating through that, but luckily I had some amazing resources to get me through those troubling times. Another challenge going through this course was figuring out that I have undiagnosed ADD, which made it very difficult to read as well. And so that was another challenging aspect that I needed to find support in, as well as just building a new support system. I moved to Denver recently from Massachusetts with nobody really, just myself. And so building that support system was very challenging for me. My strengths, however, was that I have this immense amount of confidence within my experience as a student affairs student, at least, and 1 year as a student affairs professional. So I was an orientation leader, campus tour guide, resident advisor. I worked in the Office of Multicultural Affairs at my institution, and then I finished my last year recently as the campus tour coordinator for undergraduate admissions at UMass Lowell. Go Riverhawks. So that was that. Now going into the letter Praxis project, this was a letter I was actually very excited to write about because I wanted to use this letter as a chance to finish off a project that I never really got to complete during my undergrad. And that was to incorporate an LGBTQ center at UMass Lowell. And so I was very passionate about creating LGBTQ resources at my undergrad and wanted the chance to write a letter to the chancellor as to why it was so important. But I was never able to develop the skills that I wanted to in order to write a very efficient, research-based, theory-based letter in which I can prove my case. And so I was very happy that we had the chance to write this letter, and this was an amazing opportunity for me to make up for that experience. And going through this process, it brought up a lot of personal feelings, feelings that I hadn't felt in a while, but did resurface, and some of them were painful memories, such as facing discrimination on my campus. My freshman year, for example, I returned to my dorm room in Foxhall with the word faggot scribed on my door, and it just struck so much fear in me. And that fear led to a motivation later on in my undergrad career in wanting to make sure that no other student felt that whatsoever. And that was something that I spoke a lot about in my introductory letter to Dr. Laura Sponsor, who's the instructor of this course. And although it was a painful experience, I remember why that painful experience led me to go on to be a student leader and advocate for members of my community as well. And so that is something that translated throughout this entire project, and I wanted to have that motivation resurface, and I wanted to apply that to this letter and make my case to Chancellor Maloney and say, this is why we need these resources. This is coming from not only a student that used to have, but as an alumni who wants to see future students prosper from an inclusive campus as well. And so being very vulnerable but also practical throughout this project was very important for me as well. And so a lot of the important topics that I covered was how we're creating a space for LGBT students, faculty, and staff. And so there's been plenty of research that I included in my annotated bibliography, one of which is the context of creating space, assessing the likelihood of college LGBT center presence, which was written by Fine in 2012. And this was using a theoretical framework to make their argument of resource mobilization and political opportunity. And what that basically means is political opportunity is the social and political context that happens to impact an institution and its campus climate by outside factors. And the resource mobilization is basically the reactive approach of what happens when that type of impact hits a campus. How does the institution respond by providing support and resources for its students? And I think the biggest message behind this piece of the article was institutions need to do a better job of being proactive in supporting their students rather than reactive. And I thought that was a huge component there. Other research that I included was talking about suicide prevention for LGBT students, as well as talking about sexual violence on college campuses as well. So suicide prevention, I do not believe it's a surprise for anyone when I say that there is a mental health epidemic impacting the LGBTQ community, and that's through bullying, cyberbullying, harassment, victimization that leads to suicidal ideation. And in this other article that talked about sexual violence on campus, I was really shocked, but also not surprised by how much of a presence sexual violence was within the LGBTQ community, especially for transgender women of color as well, in which there needs to be more research. And unfortunately, there's not enough of it at the moment. And it's something that I know I'm passionate about writing more about as I go throughout this program as well. And so, again, as I was completing this annotated bibliography, many things I already knew because of my personal experiences identifying as a gay man. I have unfortunately suffered with depression, anxiety, and adjustment disorder, and it all really stems from looking myself in the mirror and almost never being happy as to what I see. And a lot of that comes from my own community and the challenges that we've been through as a community, such as body dysmorphia, such as depression, anxiety, and just looking for acceptance and love. So going through my research, it really doesn't surprise me, but it's also very important for me that I'm doing my best to take this work with me and apply it to support LGBTQ students, but also the LGBTQ community and serving the public good, and how I teach my students to serve the public good, including this community or any community that they're passionate about as well. So those were some major components that I learned going through that project. Now for the course and the process itself, things that I've learned, it's such a rich amount of material that I learned this year that, again, was both surprising, but at the same time not surprising for me. I loved understanding and learning more about the historical foundations of institutions. For example, even though this is not an example from a reading from this course, it's an example from my Introduction to Public Policy course, learning about land grants and how that led to systemic oppression and the creation of historically Black colleges, universities, HSIs, tribal colleges, how it led to creating those institutions, and then understanding as to even today why those institutions are so important for minority students is something that made me even more excited to learn more about, and actually led to me writing a public policy brief in my other course on providing recommendations for providing access and opportunity for Black African American students within the state of Louisiana. So that was really cool. Something else that really excited me was talking about the current state of higher education, as well as talking about the future of higher education as well. And going through this course, I learned a lot about what is ugly about higher education at the moment and what's wrong with it. But at the same time, there's beauty behind this field that people need to hold on to as well, and need to hold on to that critical hope that motivates all of us to continue on in this field, to erase the stigma behind higher education, erasing the stigma about it not being worth it and not being affordable enough. I mean, unfortunately, it's for many people, it's not affordable. But I think it's the responsibility of the next generation of student affairs professionals, or anyone working in the higher education field, including policymakers. How are we fixing this? How are we creating access for these students? How are we able to turn their dreams into a reality? How are we able to get them to submit their application and feel confident that they're going to go through this process, and the most stressful thing that they are going to have to worry about is just how much they have to study and getting an A for a class, rather than worry more about the financial debt that they're taking on as well. And so for me, going through that and going through those readings that was written by Keeling and Hirsch, both at the beginning of the quarter as well as the end of the quarter, it kind of wraps it all together of how do we see higher education moving forward? Are we going to be backtracking, or are we going to be moving forward and moving along with society? Unfortunately, the world is constantly changing, and it's really hard to keep track of that. But what's really important about student affairs practitioners is we need to understand and be updated in the latest trends that are going on that impact our students and how we connect with our students, and how are we accommodating to the next generation of students? Because unfortunately, we're moving away from traditional students who are coming into school at the age of 18. We are now looking at a more adult population of students who are now in their 20s, going into their 30s or even 40s, who maybe want to come back and get a degree in order to advance in their fields. And so, how are we accommodating to those is constantly a question that I'm asking myself, and is a question that I ask myself every day in both courses is, oh my gosh, what are we doing to support these students? What can I do? What can I learn that's going to make me a productive member within this field as well? Lastly, in terms of knowledge and skills obtained during this course and this process that I am going to apply in the future for coursework and career life, just constantly going through this field with no expectations. It's the same thing that I've been doing since at the beginning of this year. It's a philosophy that I developed once I switched my major for the third time, and people kept asking me, well, what do you want to do? And I would just respond with, let's see. And I think having that attitude is so important, especially for higher education, and now understanding that it's constantly evolving and we're never really able to predict the next steps that the field is going to. But I think it's super important that we do have that attitude of being adaptable and being flexible. And whenever the world is moving, higher education needs to keep up with it somehow in order to stay relevant, unfortunately. So I think that's a personality of mine and a skill that I've been developing and trying to apply to this field too. Research, writing, and reading are definitely skills that I have taken away from this course that I'm going to try to apply later on in my career as well, especially as I try to navigate my undiagnosed ADD and how I can support myself. Passion, purpose, execution. I came into this program with a passion and a purpose. How to execute it is something that I'm still trying to figure out. How am I able to turn that passion for helping people, for helping students, and how am I able to take purpose? My purpose is, I truly believe, to help students within my community and other minority students. And how am I executing both of those in my courses and then outside of my field, not outside of my field, excuse me, inside my field, to help these students and support them as well. And that's something that I constantly need to keep in mind, and it is something that I am working on incorporating into my philosophy as a student affairs professional as well. And lastly, challenging myself. I need to challenge myself more, both in my assistantship and taking on more tasks that are daunting to me. And I want to conquer that fear, that same type of fear that I had when I was afraid of being discriminated against. And I want to turn that into motivation. I want to turn that same fear that I have about taking on daunting tasks and turn it into motivation to support my passion, my purpose, and how I execute that plan as well. And that's how I feel I'm going to make a real difference within this field and within this world, which is an expectation that not only others have for me, but it's an expectation that I have for myself. Yes, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and make sure to make it a great day as well.